So I finally saw the Barbie movie, and yes, it's awful. We kind of knew it was going to be awful. I didn't know it was going to be kind of this awful, but let me talk about it now. First off, let's put a disclaimer up. This movie has made $1 billion, so I mean that said, there's really nothing that anyone's opinion is going to matter on it, right? Like Avatar, all the Titanic or Endgame, and I don't even think Endgame is that amazing. I think it's really good, but there's a lot of problems with Endgame. Titanic was good. Avatar, it's very simple story, but it spoke to people, I guess, at the time. Avatar 2, even, same thing. It's really long, very simple, but looks nice. And Barbie is in this kind of weird thing where it's like it made the money. So there's really not anything I'm going to say that's going to really change anybody's opinion or anything, but I wanted my opinion to be out there. And that's that. So let's talk about it using my space system: story, pacing, artistry, characters, enjoyment. Each category gets a score between 0 and 2. 2 is the best you can get. I'm comparing this movie to itself and its promise. This is a Barbie movie. I think Barbie might be the #1 toy ever, and or at least it's a multi-billion-dollar toy. Ruth Handler, obviously, we know the story. You can watch it on Netflix, with Barbie, how she kind of borrowed the concept or whatever. And then she was the CEO of Mattel for like 30 years. I think it's like 1945 to 1975. Now that I didn't know, I looked that up. So that's a pretty good accomplishment. And and this is important. That's a female CEO for 30 years in like starting in the mid 40s, which I would say is a very good and very high accomplishment for that time period. We'll put a pin in that for now. Anyways, so the storyline, I'm going to give the storyline of this a 0.5. I was debating on giving it 0 actually, because there's a premise and that is it. And the premise of this sounded kind of interesting. See, Barbie is not, I'll talk to this in the characters, but it has to do with the story. Barbie is not really like a character, right? Like, He-Man is the other big Mattel thing. He-Man is Prince Adam. He says, I have the power. He becomes He-Man. Skeletor, there's Man-at-Arms, Tila. Like, no one's going to confuse Man-at-Arms with Mechanic or something, right? Barbie is a doll where the girls play with the doll and sort of project themselves onto it. This is why you have so many versions of Barbie. And as the roles of women got changed, the Barbies kind of went with that. So you'd have President Barbie, or you'd have, Astronaut Barbie, or Dr. Barbie, whatever, right? So I thought that this was weird. I thought that Margot Robbie was going to be the human person, because I understood what the story was. The basic story, the premise is that there's Barbie Land. It's a real place where the toys somehow link up to this land or something. And if you play with the toys, whatever you do affects the toy in the Barbie Land. Now, I would have thought that it's like Tron. Remember, the users and the programs that they use or create look like them. So I would have thought Margot Robbie would have been the girl playing with the Margot Robbie Barbie, or it's just going to be, I guess a generic little girl or something. I don't know. But why was an adult playing with Barbie? Well, in this movie, the mom is the one playing with Barbie. So the story is that in Barbie Land, whatever happens in the real world affects Barbie Land. And then Barbie starts to think about death, and her feet go flat because, the toy is always in a high heel position with her foot up or heel up. And she's like, well, what's going on? She goes to consult the weirdo Barbie who has been played with too much. So she's got like marker on her face and all that. She's in the splits because that's the thing, they break the toy and make the splits. So it's like that kind of a thing. And you're like, okay, so that's the basic premise. Now, based on what Barbie is, I would have thought that this movie would have been let's celebrate what Barbie is, and, maybe do a nice little story with like a mom and daughter reconnecting, which they kind of had in this movie. And that was why I'm giving it a 0.5, because there is an attempt to have a mother-daughter relationship, but it's so minimal. This movie got bogged down with the filmmakers' like ideologies. I mean, they may as well have just done an entire movie on just her ideologies. Like, why even have a story then? Just sit in front of a camera and say everything bad that you hate about society, about men, whatever it is. Just do that. You basically took Barbie and ruined it. I don't know who this movie is for at all, because obviously, let's say it's not for me or my demographic. Well, whose demographic is it for? Because I feel like after watching this movie, I'd be like, well, the Barbie sucks. Like, why would I buy the toys? I don't understand. They had this whole thing where it's like the real world and all that. I was like, well, if the real world is ruled by all the evil men, then how come Barbie Land isn't ruled by the men? Because it mirrors the real world. Like, if all of the girls feel bad or they're oppressed or they're hated, then why isn't every Barbie like Margot Robbie messed up? So, but you might be saying, well, they're just little girls and they don't know that yet, right? I guess. I don't think that this movie is clever. Like, I've seen some positive reviews of it and saying, oh, this is all just very cleverly disguised and they're just showing you this kind of stuff, but really there's something else going on. I don't think that there is, not at all. I got to look at my notes a little bit because I did write a lot. But even if I removed the ideology, which is impossible, it's like saying, let's remove all the jokes from a Marx Brothers movie or something. It's like, and then there's no movie. Like the Marx Brothers films, I'm using this as an example. I use Lego as an example too. The Marx Brothers movies are the Marx Brothers, the early ones in the first bit of their career before they switched the studios. They're all just crazy excuses to have jokes. Like Duck Soup, like what is the storyline of Duck Soup? The guy's the head of Fredonia and then that's it, and there's a war. Like, it's just nonsense. It's nonsense because you're there to see the Marx Brothers do all their little gags, Harpo with his little sight gags, Chico with his play on words. You've got Groucho with his one-liners and comebacks, right? Zeppo, I guess, just to be there. I like Zeppo, he's all right. So that's what you're there to see. Now, in my opinion, which again is my opinion, I'm seeing a Barbie movie because I want to see a celebration of Barbie. And this whole idea of like, oh, they're going to take Barbie and put her into the real world. Well, she didn't go into the real world. She went into the fake ideology of the filmmakers' world. That's the world that she went into. The world where the entire Mattel boardroom is filled with men, when in reality, there's women there. There's at least 4 or 5 women that you can just Google and see. So if I can just Google and see that, that's not real. So either this is a very clever tactic by the filmmakers to be like, well, this is what you perceive it to be, but really it's this, but you never get the really it's this. It's also slightly boring for that. And I'm going to get to pacing, but the Barbie Land parts is kind of what we wanted to see. This happened with, Lego. Lego's a great example of taking Lego, which I thought, how are they going to make a movie out of this? And celebrating Lego, but also celebrating family and parents and I like parents and their children. I was stunned when the real people showed up. I thought, well, this is really cool. They integrated that so perfectly. Lego movie is actually very good. That's a very good movie. Much better than this, that's for sure. Let me see here. What other things can I mention here? Yeah, another thing in the storyline at one point, so Ken comes out into the real world and learns about the patriarchy, which he just doesn't understand. And he goes back to Barbie Land and takes over Barbie Land, and they don't show that. So how did that happen? If the little girls playing with Barbie affect the world in Barbie, how can an outside person come and affect it when it's built from the imaginations of the girls playing with the toy? Like, Ken is treated like crap in this movie, but he actually should be treated like crap if you actually think about it, because Ken is actually an accessory toy. Like, when a girl is playing with her Barbie dolls, they're playing Barbie as I'm this Barbie and I'm that Barbie, and they're playing and doing little things, right? Ken is equal to like Barbie's car, right? Like, if you want the Barbie mobile, you're just like, if you're a little girl, you're like, oh, Mom, I want the Barbie mobile, for Christmas or something. And so, oh, do you want Ken? Yeah, I don't know. Like, Ken is an afterthought in the play. He's an accessory toy. He's not the main brand toy. It's a little bit different with other toy lines. Like, if you buy Optimus Prime, you want Megatron, right? He-Man, Skeletor, like those are your guys. And now if you're going to play He-Man, you need to have a He-Man and a Skeletor. You don't necessarily need to have a Man-at-Arms or an Evil-Lyn or a Beast-Man. That's why they keep releasing the He-Man and the Skeletor guys with every wave, a new version, because you want kids to be able to purchase the two main components. Barbie is a bit different because you're just buying the Barbie that you want. They all look the same. Now, they do have different skin tones to represent different skin tones in real life. So that's represented in the movie, and that's just fine. There also is a lot of little funny references to discontinued toy lines or discontinued models. So there's a lot of stuff like that. I'm not a Barbie expert, but even I was able to pick up on some of these, and I thought that was very cute, and they put those in. That was kind of funny. But when Ken goes back to change everything into like the male-dominated Barbie land, how does that actually happen when the girls control the play pattern? Like, you're not. I guess you're not supposed to ask these questions, but the thing is that you brought the real world into this. As soon as you bring the real world into it, then I start thinking like a real world person. If you just made this, because there's been several Barbie cartoons, like animated features. I haven't seen any of them, but I'm pretty sure they're just generic Barbie fun movies, right? Like that's what this really should have been. Just celebrate the character and have people come together. The marketing was genius, having it pink. I saw a lot of women at the theater. On opening night when I was seeing Oppenheimer, I saw a lot of them dressed up in the pink, and I thought, wow, this is a great marketing campaign. You really kind of brought people together. It's unfortunate that they brought all these people together to see this really lackluster movie that was actually kind of boring at times. Let's get into the pacing. This movie is 2 hours. I'm going to give the pacing, I'm going to give it a 0.5 as well, because there was a lot of gaps that you're like, wow, this just needs to go. Like, it's just nothing's going on. The problem, because the story, every so often you think there's going to be a little bit of a story, so you kind of get excited again. Like when the mother and daughter come in, you're like, oh, now this will be about the mother and daughter's relationship and how Barbie can help, bring them closer together. But that doesn't really happen. It gets bogged down in this, generic plot of, oh, well, now we have to vote or something. Like, Ken takes over the Barbie land, and then he gives everyone 48 hours to vote whether the men should rule. But if the men are ruling now, why would they even bother giving the vote? Again, you can say, is this being clever because the men in real life ruled and then they gave women the right to vote and then they beat them? I don't understand. I don't understand the point of that. So the pacing suffers because as it was going on, it started off very fun in Barbie Land. It was very cute and colorful. I'll get to the artistic part in a minute. And then you're like, okay, this is kind of fun, right? And then boom, it just starts hitting you with like stupid one-liner jokes. None of it was funny at all, actually. I did not laugh at all. A lot of one-liner jokes and just like, again, these, beach off and stuff. Like, is this for kids? There's a 2001 Space Odyssey reference. It's like, don't mention one of the greatest films ever made in your trash movie. Like, anyway, do little kids watch 2001 A Space Odyssey? A lot of my friends think it's boring. So I love it. It's my second favorite movie of all time. But anyways, so yeah, the pacing suffers. It picks up a little bit when you get the mother and daughter. I thought, oh, here we go. This will start, getting going somewhere. Unfortunately, it doesn't really go anywhere at all. It just peters out with this whole Ken thing. I think that they had a good premise. They had an idea for what they wanted to accomplish. And it just got bogged down with these ideological statements and just like silly plotting. It's really silly. It's really bad. The artistry, the movie looks very good. I'm torn on this one. I might give it a 1.5 out of 2. The Barbie Land parts look very cool. And I'm sure if you're a Barbie fan, you can point out, all of the little details of like their costumes, of like little accessory toys. Like, oh, look, there's her little fridge. There's her little, milk cup or whatever. I'm going to give it a 1.5. The music's okay. There's some songs that I feel shouldn't be there. But everything looks good. Like when they go to the real world, that's fine. But really there is quite a lot of it in Barbie Land, and Barbie Land does look kind of neat. So I'll give them that. And there's a lot of attention to detail. So that's important. Movies are still visuals, so you have to give credit where it's due. The reason I'm not going all the way, because I actually think they could have heightened it a little bit more, maybe made it a little bit more, you know, kooky, like just a bit more. Also, the music I don't think was very good. I think they should have went with very light, fun music so that it becomes timeless. Like, this movie's not going to be timeless because all of the social politics that had to be thrown in, but they could have done a little bit better with the music. I didn't like the music that much, but it looked okay. So that's 1.5. So we're at, what are we at? 1, 2, we're at 2.5 at this point. So 2.5 for the characters. I'm going to give it a 0.5 for the characters. I will say that I think Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie are both good actors, and I like them in other roles. Obviously, Margot Robbie's very pretty, and Ryan Gosling's a good-looking guy as well. I think they're kind of wasted. Their talents are wasted. They do give it their all. Margot Robbie does, you know, get into the character and play it as best as she could. My problem with not giving it more than 0.5 is that everyone else in the movie, including most of the other Barbies and Kens, are actually awful. Will Ferrell is in this movie because he's Will Ferrell, and they thought that'll be funny. Unfortunately, it's not. Very, very bad humor. It's just, you're just like, it's not even rolling your eyes. You're just like, if I was to film myself watching this in these reaction videos, I'd be like this. Like, I was like this the whole time. I smiled a couple times. If I smiled, it's usually because Ken said something kind of funny. So I'm still giving it a 0.5. I despised the daughter in this movie. I hated that character. She was annoying and trash. The mom, I liked her for about 1 minute of screen time, and then I hated her. She sucks. Yeah. Like, Rhea Perlman plays Ruth Handler in a part which is just like pointless. They could have done something very interesting with that, but they didn't. It was really stupid. I'm giving it a 0.5 because, you know, Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling gave it their all. That's it. Enjoyment factor, I'm going to give it a 0 for enjoyment factor. My enjoyment factor is based on 4 components. Would I recommend watch, or did I like this movie? No. Would I recommend people to watch it? No. Would I watch it again? No. Would I purchase it on 4K or Blu-ray? No. So if I say no to all 4 of those components, that's a 0. I'm giving this film a total score of 3 out of 10. I believe that's very generous. If it did not look as neat as it did, it would have really suffered. It would have been like, you know, like a 1.5 star movie or something like that out of 10. Let me go through, and is there any other kind of things I wanted to mention? I mean, really, even with the minimal story that they had, they did not succeed at all. If you were asking me to say, hey, why don't you do a Barbie movie? However, you need to insert a lot of this stuff about women's rights and how men suck and all this kind of thing. I believe I could have done it in a better way, which is to say that why don't you have it where there are, you know, women in the movie that have good roles, but they're constantly not able to get to the top role, perhaps. Do something like that then. Like, the sillier they made it and the dumber it got, it just kept like removing those points. So anytime that there was a point that you might be like, yeah, I see where you're coming from, it gets destroyed by bad humor, right? And so they didn't even follow through, really. It's all surface level stuff, like where they just say something and then that's it. It's not challenged, and it's bad. Like, I mean, lots of shows. Star Trek is one of my favorite television shows of all time, top 3. There's so many social issues discussed, you know, like racism, slavery, all this stuff. And they discussed it in great ways. Next Generation had an entire episode of genderless aliens who wanted to pick a gender, but their society didn't allow them to. And that was handled really well. They presented all these different sides to it. You got a chance to see what the characters would think about this. And as a viewer, you got to think about the topic yourself at home and discuss it in the home and, you know, see what your thoughts are. this movie didn't accomplish that at all. So I don't really know what they wanted to make out of this movie. Regardless, I said this at the beginning. If you're still here, it's been 20 minutes. Thank you so much for sticking in with this review. I've tried to keep this as kind of level-headed as possible. I was accused of being rage video in my last review, so I'm being taking it down a notch. But honestly, I don't think that this movie has enough for you to get angry about it. I think it's just really bad. And even if you removed all the ideological crap, you'd have like a 10-minute movie and it would be kind of boring, like even at 10 minutes. So I don't know. It made $1 billion. I said this at the beginning. Listen, it made $1 billion. Who am I? I'm not even the target audience. So there's that to consider. And what do I know? It made $1 billion. I will say this, I'm quite scared. Well, I'm not scared, but I foresee that people copying this method or doing more of these types of movies, it's really going to help me out because I'm a physical media collector. I love buying the Blu-rays, 4Ks. If I can't get it on that, I'll buy a DVD, I'll buy a VHS tape if I have to. I'm going to be spending a lot less money on physical media, so I'm looking forward to spending less money on physical media. And trust me, with over 3,000 Blu-rays, I think I'm covered for a while. So that is my review of Barbie, 3 out of 10. Let me know in the comment, and if you want to yell at me or something in the comments or say I'm stupid, that's fine. That is completely your right. But I might respond in a very funny way, so keep that in mind, all right? But please share your thoughts. And that's it. Until next time.